Okay, guys, well, you caught me into it. I am back with another tutorial video, and this one is a big one. I may have to split this up into multiple parts. So I posted a poll on my YouTube channel today, and by an overwhelming majority, people want to know more about pilot training and pilot management. And I've said this before in previous videos. Pilot management, pilot training is like its own little mini game inside of this game. It's complicated, it's massive, it's time consuming, and it's a lot of fun. So I don't claim to be the end all be all expert on pilot training and management, nowhere close to it. However, I think I do know enough that I can teach new players the basics and the fundamentals of how it works, what it is, what the buttons do, all that stuff. So I'm going to attempt to do that on this video and maybe subsequent videos. Okay, there is a lot to discuss here, and again, like I said, I still don't know that I understand every little nuance. So if you feel like you know something that I don't know, if you feel like I missed something important, or if I downright say something that you feel is incorrect, call me out. Let me know what it is. Put it in the comments so I can make a correction. Come to my Discord. Tell me how I'm screwing something up. Because to me, this is like an old mini game. And, you know, there's so much to know as it is that I may not be getting everything straight. With that being said, let's dive into it. And we'll start with the pilot replacement section. Okay? I feel like this is a good starting point for this discussion. So you can access this by going to your intelligence tab. Again, I have a different UI that some of you may have, but the buttons are all labeled the same. So where we're going to start here is the pilot replacements section. So we click here. So what do we see here? We see all the nationalities you control. So if you're playing Japan, you'll only see two. You'll see Imperial Japanese Army, Imperial Japanese Navy. Are they the same nationality? Technically, yes, they're Japanese, but the game considers them two separate services, much like the game for the Allies considers the Navy, the Marines, and the Army three separate nationalities, even though we're all U.S., okay? So, what are we looking here? Let's just go right across the top. U.S. Navy, for example, what does this mean in pool? This tells you how many pilots you have sitting in your replacement pool ready to be used right now this turn, okay? So, we have, this is a staggering amount, right? 7,000 pilots that we could put into different squadrons right now to fill them out if they're low on pilots, if we want to bulk them up for additional training, you name it. We have 7,200 pilots, okay? What does added mean? Added means this is the amount of pilots that were added this month from training into our pool. And if you look at this number, you'll notice it's, if you round it up, it's about 1,800. If you come over here to this 10 to 12 number, you'll see that it's 1,800. So, when pilots graduate from here, you will get this amount added to your pool every month. And you notice that this number is approximately 1/3 of this number. Okay? Every month, so the training goes on a 12-month cycle for these pilots. On the 13th month, if you will, is when they're deposited into your pool. You'll notice that it's not exactly 1,800 if you round that up, right? That is the game considering pilots getting washed out, pilots getting killed in training, pilots getting wounded, reassigned, you name it. I looked in the manual and it specifically says that this number and this number may not be exact for those reasons, okay? Let's continue on. Experience, what does this mean? This is the average amount of experience that the pilots in your pool have. It doesn't mean that every single pilot you have will come out assigned to a squadron at level 40. But you'll notice you'll get some that are 37, some that are 40, some that are 42. And so this is an average of the experience of the pilots you could expect to get out of your replacement pool into your squadrons if you pull them out. Okay, so 40 is actually not too bad. That's definitely the highest of any of the experience levels that I have seen for all the nationalities. Replacement. What does replacement mean? This is the amount of pilots that are starting from scratch every month for your nationality, okay? So looking here, these pilots in the replacement will dump into the training as of month 1. Okay? Now, what does this mean? Month 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, 10, 12. Okay, so like I said, the training goes by a 12-month cycle from them getting recruited off the street by a recruiter to them being available to be added to a frontline squadron. All right? This will tell you the amount of training that they will receive at the 3-month mark. So, 2,345 pilots by 3 months will have an experience level of 2. So basically, absolutely brand new. They barely know how to fly at all. Okay. At 6 months, you can expect the average experience of your pilots in that at this level to be 11. At 9 months, it's going to be 19, and here it's going to be 31. And then by the time they get to here, that's what then you're going to start diluting this experience level here. Okay. Why do these numbers mean anything? Because let's say you were playing the Chinese and you need 125 pilots right now. You burn them up. Okay. Over here, once you burn these up, the game will start accelerating training and start dumping these 9-month pilots into your pool, or your 3-month pilots are going to be going into the 6-month, but they're not going to have the same level of training proficiency as they would if they stayed in for the 12 months. So you have to be very cognizant of the amount of pilots you have in your pool here, and you don't want to draw too many because the game will start moving up and speeding up the pilot replacement through these months here. And when they get added to your pool, they will have less experience than they would have had if they'd gone through the normal training regimen. Okay? Is this clear as mud? I hope it isn't, but that's basically how this screen works. So obviously, if you're the U.S. Navy right now, you're sitting pretty. You've got a fair amount of pretty decent pilots that you can pull out of the pool, and you can expect them to have an experience level of 40. That does not mean that their individual air skills are going to be 40. They could be not random. You don't know what you're going to get exactly, right? You may get lucky and get a pilot that has a random air experience that's high, and you put him into a fighter squadron, and he's great, right? And from what I understand, the game does sort through the pool and look for pilots that have a certain proficiency and a certain type of skill, and it will attempt to put them into the squadron aircraft type that they've got. Because as you recall from other videos and what we'll also cover here, there's about 10 different skills that pilots can have or have values in, right? And they're all random here in your pool, in their training. Some have different paths and things that we can't see. It's off screen. The game will attempt to draw pilots with the highest skill for the type of aircraft they're in to put them into the squadrons. Maybe. All right. So that's this screen. And I'm going to click out of here to get some music going again. Good. From the pilot replacement screen, you see a button here called Reserve Pool. Now, this is important. Let's click on this. Okay. This is the pilot reserve pool. Okay. Now, in this screen, you have many different options. You can sort by the nationalities. So if we want to only see U.S. Army, for example, we could click on that. If we only want to see, for example, the Soviet Air Force, we could click on that. So whatever's green is what's going to be shown. All right. So if it's green, that means you see it. If it's yellow, it means you don't. All right. And from here, this will tell you the type of reserve that the pilot belongs to. So these pilots here were trained as bomber pilots, and they previously came out of bomber type units, or that's where their skills are. So they go to the bomber reserve. You have fighter reserve. You can have additional reserves such as recon, patrol, transport, depending on the specialty of the pilot. Over here is their rank, which isn't necessarily that important per se. It does not, the high rank does not necessarily equate to high skill. So don't get too caught up on the rank. The name is just a cool little thing for that the game designers want to put in to make you feel like you're more connected to these guys, right? These names don't mean anything. What is due? Due means this is the month and year that these pilots will become available for you to reassign to something else. If it has a dash mark by it, That means that they're either available now or they're never going to be available. Okay? And I'll get into that. The mission, this is mission count, how many missions they've flown. Kills, these are kills that the pilots have. All right? Like I have a few pilots in my fighter reserve, for example, that have some kills. All right? So that will be listed here. Experience is their total experience level, not their aircraft skill or their bombing skill. It's the total experience level, and that's listed here. And you can sort by all of these by clicking on the top. All right. So we have some pilots in here that are actually very experienced and have great skill. Look at this guy, Iverson. I need to get him in a unit. Okay, status. This is an important one. So in the reserve pool, you're going to see one of two statuses. You're going to see okay or wounded in action. Okay, what's the difference, you might ask? Wounded in action means that they're wounded. And one of two things can happen when you have a wounded in action pilot. They can either be available or they can't. Sometimes you'll have a wounded in action pilot that is going to that will recover and will be ready to be reassigned to a squadron. And this will tell you what month and year that will be. It doesn't tell you how many days out it is necessarily, but it'll tell you what month and day. I can show you where you can find the month, the actual day later on. Now, you will occasionally see wounded in action pilots that have a dash by them. That basically means that this pilot is so badly wounded that you're never going to be able to use him again. Okay? So, at that point, that pilot's no longer useful to you. So, what do we do with a pilot that's wounded in action and you can't reassign him? Well, there's an option for that. You can leave him there just so you can look at him, or you can do this. You click on their name, and you can put retire pilot Miller DH. So, when you do that, you'll notice that the pilot is no longer in the list. He's gone. He's no longer in the game. He's out of play. I do that for wounded in action pilots that I can't bring back because they're no longer a use for me. Unless they're pilots that have a lot of kills and I kind of want to sit there and admire them, whatever. I don't get too sentimental about that sort of thing. But since we're on the screen, I want to warn you about these buttons down here. Okay? These buttons release / retire from the reserve different pilots, and they'll go, and you can sort it like this, and it will go by releasing pilots from the reserve or TRACOM, which we'll talk about TRACOM later. It'll release them from the game and just get rid of them. I don't recommend doing that. There's no good reason to do it that I can think of. And if you start clicking these buttons, you may or may not start dumping out really good pilots. Because let's say all of your pilots in reserve have high experience, but the lowest one's like 68. You can start getting rid of 68 experienced pilots if you get too punchy with these buttons. So I recommend you don't touch them. And if you feel compelled to retire a pilot, click on it manually and click yes or no. Again, I don't do it unless it's a wounded pilot that's no good, that doesn't do me any good. All right. So let's continue on to these different types of pools. We have a thing called TRACOM here. And I will show you an example of TRACOM right now. Okay, so I went over to a Japanese AI save game, and I think I'll stay here for the rest of these videos because it'll accomplish what we need. Okay, so what is TRACOM? This is called Training Command. What is Training Command? Training Command is a place where you can put high experienced pilots, anything over 80. And what these pilots do is they help train your incoming pilots to get them to a higher skill level. So when they come into your pool, they have more experience. So the game does not have a lot of explanation as to what TRACOM does and how it works. There's a lot of theory, and people have ideas about what the minimum amount of pilots should be in Training Command. I don't know exactly what it should be. I've heard numbers anywhere from 10 to 100. Individual results may vary. What I do know is you have to have a minimum of 80 experience in as your pilot to get put into TRACOM. So I put in pilots that I want to save for later. For example, like on this particular campaign, I've got some pilots that are starting to get some good experience and have a lot of kills. and I don't want them to die needlessly right now. So once they get to a certain level, and I have a number in my head that I want them to have, I will move them to TRACOM, and hopefully at that point, these pilots will help train pilots in their respective nationality and increase their overall experience level, so that by the time they get to the pool, they have a higher experience than they would have if these guys weren't there. Again, don't ask me to quantify how much this works. I can't, because it's all done under the hood of this game, and I can't find good references in the manuals how many pilots you need in TRACOM to make your pilots get more experience. Like X amount of pilots in TRACOM equates to X amount of increased in experience level. I don't know what that is. I do know that it does something. So, what I recommend to you is, as you get pilots that are capable of going into TRACOM, you put them in there as it fits into your campaign. So, I'll show you how to put them in right now. So, what you'll do is, let's say you're working with one of your squadrons, right? You'll notice that these pilots here that are, once they get over a skill of 80, so 81 and up. If I said 80 before, I misspoke. It's 81 and up. 81 and up qualifies them for TRACOM assignment, and their name turns from white to yellow. So you'll notice now that I moved the mouse over this, it says left click to send to TRACOM, right click to make inactive in group. So if I want to send Sugiyama to TRACOM, I would left click on it, and it will ask me, transfer Sugiyama F to training command. I'll hit it yes. Now, let's go back and look at training command. A lot of buttons to click, right? Look at that. Sugiyama. So, again, it says the month and the year that he will be available. We don't know exactly what day. It's going to be a random number, okay? I've seen anywhere from 1 to 7 delay, and the game will spit out a random delay for a pilot if you move them in this manner. But in probably about a week, Sugiyama will then be assigned to TRACOM and will be able to be used to help increase the skill of your incoming pilot pool. All right? The more pilots you put in here, theoretically, the more training that your pilots will get. Again, I can't quantify it for you because I can't find it anywhere, the calculation. I just know that it does something, so I recommend you do it. One other cool little thing about this is this can be used as like a storage location for your most elite pilots you got. So let's say you start dumping all your best pilots into the TRACOM, right? And later on in the war, you get a squadron that comes out with really, really good aircraft, right? But your pilot pool is crappy because you've depleted it. And you want to make this like your super duper hunter killer fighter bomber squadron or whatever it is. You can go back into TRACOM here and actually transfer these pilots out, okay? Now, I don't recommend that you click these buttons because this will retire them, but you can click on this guy, for example, and it will transfer him to the reserve, right? If we transfer him to the reserve, he now goes into our reserve pool, and we can use him. Look at that. There he is. We can use him to be put into a frontline squadron again, and now we're going to have this crazy high experience, high kill pilot that can be used with these awesome frontline aircraft, and they're going to be like the most deadly unit that you got. So that's another use for TRACOM. But again, this TRACOM thing is for pilots of 81 skill and up, and they are supposedly here to help train your incoming pilot pool so that when they get to your pool, they have more experience. Okay, let's keep going. Now, we have another thing called group. What is group? This is one of the pools that I have the hardest time understanding what it's for. Okay, so basically, kind of off screen, a lot of your squadrons have pilots that are waiting to go into them or just kind of in a standby mode. Okay, you'll also see this for squadrons that are forming up brand new. Let's say like for example, in 52 days, we have this new squadron coming in. Let me give you an example. Let's go up to our group reinforcement schedule. We see here the 14th Kokutai is getting a Mavis squadron in 6 days at Kwajalein Island. Okay, 14th Kokutai, right? T1. Let's go back and look at the group now. Oops, wrong button. Let's look at the group and let's sort this out. Fourteenth Kokutai T1. See that? So this pilot is waiting in that group to be assigned. And you notice when he's due? So basically what I'm seeing here is that the 14th Kokutai is going to deploy to Kwajalein with basically one pilot. Okay, Commander Nakajima, who's very experienced by the way, will be the lead pilot for this new unit, and we will have to fill it out with more aircraft and more pilots. But you'll see any new units coming onto the map will have pilots predestined to go into them, and you'll see them in the group. You'll also see pilots like this that are in this group section. I like to do this too, and I sort by wounded in action. These are pilots that belong to a squadron but got wounded, for example, and are just kind of waiting in limbo for something to happen. Some of these guys have assignments, and they're going to be going back to their squadrons on these dates. So if you see a pilot with a group here, and it has a date, this pilot here, Katsuma, for example, will be rejoining the Zuiho 2A in April of 1942. But you also see pilots here that are wounded but don't have an assignment. And why is that? Because maybe they're not needed. The squadron's full up and it doesn't need more pilots. But let's say you want to get them back into play. Let me show you a cool little trick to get these wounded in action pilots who are just kind of stuck in limbo doing nothing. So let's check this pilot here. Hirano C. You see how he's wounded? Check this out. Let me click on him. Transfer to reserve. Alright. Now if we go back to reserve and we sort by name. Where's he at? Hirano C. Check that out. He's currently listed as wounded in action, but he will return in April of 1942. When he returns from wounded in action on this date, his status will change from wounded in action to OK. So I like to go into the group page every now and then, sort by wounded, and anything that does not already have a date, I click it and send it to the reserve. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that now, and I'll show you what we're going to get. This thing's such a pain. Alright. There we go. Transfer to reserve. Okay, so now if we go to reserve and we sort by wounded in action, you'll see that we have a significant amount of these pilots here that are now coming back into play that were formerly wounded in action in group having no assignment. Now, the ones that have the dashes, guess what? I'm going to retire them because they're not coming back. See that? Like this poor guy, Ito S. What a shame. 111 missions. This guy was a warrior. Put all kinds of action in there. Good experience, but he got so wounded that he's never going to return. So it's time to retire this guy. Good luck, Ito S. I hope you enjoy the rest of the war at home. There you go. So that's what the group pool does. It shows you pilots destined to other units, either because it's standing up for the first time, or they're going to be replacements, or they're wounded, or they were wounded and they don't have an assignment now. Okay? So there you go. That's the group pool. Again, this is the pool that I understand the least, and it's the one that I don't mess with the most. So if you know something more about group pilot reserve pool that I don't know and you think it's important, bring it up. Okay, so we've covered the reserve. We've covered TRACOM. And he does all of them together. And you'll notice how the pilot counts change, right? So if we're looking at group, there's only 99 pilots in group, 141 pilots in reserve, 16 in TRACOM. Add it all together in any, and you have 256 total, right? Okay, that's a lot. So we just talked about the pilot replacements and the reserve pool, and also I also discussed how to get wounded pilots from the group that have no assignment back into play, and what to do with pilots that are wounded and show no date. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop this video here and make this a multi-part video because we still have so much more to discuss about additional pilot management and how to get these pilots to different squadrons, how to train them, and how to assign them to missions, all that stuff. That's another 2 videos worth of stuff, I think. If if you feel like I didn't cover something well, or you have more questions, or you want to correct me if I made a mistake in something, please leave a comment or come over to Discord and tell me what I messed up so I can get better information out to you guys. All right, I'm going to end this one here, but we got a lot more coming, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching.